We have one more curve to talk about in building our model of aggregate supply and aggregate demand, and that's the short-run aggregate supply curve. So here we want to think about why short-run aggregate supply might differ from our long-run potential output when the price level is different from what we expect. Okay, so we have, again, this should not be immediately intuitive to you, right? That short-run aggregate supply would depend on price level. We have three theories to explain why short-run aggregate supply might be different than our long-run output level when the price differs from the expected price level. Okay, so try to keep that in mind, that what we're doing is saying here we have some expected price level, P, and when the price level in the economy deviates from what we expected, say it's higher than expected, then our short run output would be too high. So as the price level increases above what we expected, if we have unexpectedly high inflation, okay, for example, that would lead to a short-term increase in output above the level that is sustainable in the long run. And likewise, if we had a price level that was lower than what we expected, we would have a short run level of output that is lower than our long run potential. And these deviations in output from the long run potential are what we are trying to model when we model business cycle fluctuations. Just keep thinking back to those graphs that we looked at in the beginning where we saw long run economic growth, and around that many ups and downs as the economy expands and contracts, expands and contracts. These are the fluctuations that we're trying to explain in this model of aggregate supply and aggregate demand. Why is it that sometimes the economy grows really fast, and why is it that sometimes it crashes? Okay, so here you can see when we have a short run aggregate supply curve that's upward sloping like this, then in the short run, output might deviate from our long run potential when prices are different from what we expected. So why would that be the case? Why would our short run aggregate supply curve be upward sloping like this? We're going to talk about three theories here that explain these deviations from long run potential output in a different way, each of them in a slightly different way. In other words, they explain why the short run aggregate supply curve is upward sloping. Okay, so let's go to those theories here. We've got sticky wages, sticky prices, and misperceptions. Now, in economics, the word sticky means something in particular. It means slow to change, okay? So think of something that's sticky. It's not easy to move very much, right? Like you pour some sticky honey, it goes slower than water, right? So sticky means slow to change in economics. And so here we have wages that are sticky or stuck at some point and cannot easily adjust to the price level that is different than what we expected. So here, wages are fixed in the short run, while commodity prices, right? The prices of goods and services can fluctuate. And of course, that means that profits will fluctuate. So how would this explain that short run aggregate supply curve is upward sloping? Well, what we're going to see here is we're going to work through these as if prices were lower than expected, and then think about why output might be lower than expected in the short run. Okay, so why do lower than expected prices lead to lower levels of output in the short run? All right. So let's just think about what's happening here. If the price level is lower than expected, then firms would like to be able to reduce wages. Remember, price level refers to prices across all goods and services within the economy, including input payments or input costs, right? So now the value of money has increased. Each dollar buys more stuff, so prices have dropped. We would like to also drop or decrease the amount of money that we pay to our inputs, labor, capital, right, natural resources, etc. But we may be not able to do that if wages are fixed in the short term, okay? So why would wages be fixed in the short term? We'll talk about that in a second. Let me just write this down, okay? So if the price level is lower than what we expected, then we have wages that are too high and unable to adjust downward to the new price level. So firms have set wages too high. Okay. So say we have a wage here that was set before we realized this new lower price level. We expected the price level to be higher. We set this wage, price level is actually lower, and the equilibrium wage is lower than the wage that we have set as the firm. Okay, so why might this happen? Well, one reason is that labor contracts and wages do not adjust very quickly, right? They don't adjust day to day, month to month, unless you're driving Uber, I guess. But like my contract, my labor contract, right, has a set wage that is adjusted just one time per year, right? And even then, it may be difficult to adjust wages, particularly adjusting wages downwards. So I'm gonna actually have you watch a video about that after we finish this, but labor contracts are typically fixed, at least for very short periods of time, and adjusting wages downward is particularly difficult because it you know, nobody wants their wage to go down, okay? So we've got these wages, right? I have my contract. I know what my wage is going to be for the next year, regardless of what the price level is. When I signed that contract, right, I had some expectation about the price level, as did my employer, and they gave me a salary based on that expectation about the value of money over the course of the next year. And here we've set that wage too high. So what does that mean, right, for the business and for profits? It means the firm is not going to be making a lot of money, right? Because their product prices have dropped, but their labor costs have remained the same. So their profits will go down. And you can see that even here, like in the graph, if I have a wage that's fixed higher than the equilibrium wage, right? My labor supply would go up, my labor demand would go down. This is the quantity that's actually traded in the market. What's going to happen is the business is going to hire fewer workers, right? They're going to hire fewer workers because they're less profitable and workers are more expensive than they should be. Okay, so this will cause firms to reduce employment and therefore production. But this is a short-term problem, right? This is only happening because wages are sticky, because they're stuck at a level that is higher than the equilibrium wage. Once wages are able to adjust downward, then everything will go back to where it should be, right? To here, right? Where we have our long run employment and output. Okay, so this will happen until wages can adjust to the new price level. Okay, so when the price level is different than what we expect, perhaps the wages we've set in our contracts are different than what they should be, and take some time for that to adjust. And in the meantime, we might have a short run decrease in employment and output. That would be a recession, right? Now you will notice that like all of these theories are really reasons why the market isn't quite working as it should, right? Like ideally, prices go down, you adjust wages down, no problem, right? Each of these explanations as to why short-run aggregate supply is upward sloping has to do with some kind of breakdown or failure in the market to adjust smoothly to changes in the price level. All right, so let's move on to sticky prices. So sticky prices, as you might guess now, means that product prices, prices of goods and services might be sticky or fixed in the short run, while wages and profits fluctuate, right? So maybe wages aren't sticky, but if prices are sticky, then we could also get a short run, an upward sloping short run aggregate supply curve. Okay, so let's just now assume that wages fluctuate freely with the price level and think about what happens if product prices are sticky. So if product prices are sticky, and the price level is lower than expected. Remember, we're trying to follow this logic of when the price level is lower than expected, we see smaller short run output than our long run equilibrium potential. So if the price level is lower than expected, the logic for these works in the opposite direction, like it works in the same way, right? Thinking about price levels that are higher than what we expected, but we're gonna stick with this lower than expected price level for these examples. When the price level is lower than expected, product prices are set too high. And if product prices are set too high, then what does that mean about the business's profitability? So you're a business, your restaurant, say, you got a menu, you set prices for your food, and now after you've set your menu prices, you realize, or maybe you don't realize, the price level is lower in the economy than what you expected or what you thought it was. And what you see then is people are not going to come to your restaurant as much, right? So you see a decrease in quantity demanded since your prices are fixed higher than the real long run equilibrium price. So this will cause consumers to purchase less, leading to a short run decrease in production until the price level or the price you fixed for your product can adjust downward. All right, so here wages fluctuate freely, but our product prices are sticky in the short run. So when the price level is lower than expected, my business is not going to be as profitable as it could be, and I might scale back production in the short run until prices can adjust to the long run level of prices. Okay, good. So we've got sticky wages, sticky prices. And why might sticky prices happen? Well, you've got, you know, some businesses, it may be hard to adjust prices. Consumers might react negatively to adjustment in prices, particularly upward adjustment in prices. And I think misperceptions theory also helps us understand a little bit more why product prices might be slow to change in the short run. So misperceptions theory has to do with the fact that nobody is going to walk up to a business owner and say, your product prices are too low or too high based on our level of inflation or the expected price level in the economy. That's just not how it works, right? Like, you're a restaurant, you set your prices, you see some increase in your product costs, you might increase your prices, etc. But like, no one tells you, right, this is what your prices should be in the long run. And so changes in your profitability as a business or the general price level may be quite confusing to people, because both consumers and producers, because right, for consumers, no one is telling you, well, the price of apples went up, not because it's more expensive to produce apples, but because the prices of everything in the economy are going up, right? No one tells you that. You just go to the store and you see apples are more expensive, and you might not buy them because they're more expensive, when actually all prices are increasing, right? So misperceptions is when people misinterpret changes in the general price level for changes let's just say maybe as changes in the relative prices of products, which are signals about the relative value and profitability of different products in our economy. Remember, one of the ways that we use money, we use prices, is as a unit of account, right? We use it to compare the value of different products, both as consumers, but also as producers, right? So maybe as a producer, you see, oh, people aren't coming into I've set my price, you've set your price too high, people aren't coming in to buy your product. What needs to happen is your price needs to adjust downward. But maybe you can't see that. Maybe you just think, well, people aren't coming to buy my product, they must not like my product, right? They must prefer other products, and maybe my product is just not that profitable. You might decide to go out of business, or you know, scale back your business rather than just adjusting your price downward, because you've misinterpreted that lack of demand for your product, not as a signal that your prices are too high, but as a signal that people are not interested, like low demand for your product, a signal that demand for your product in particular is low, not just that the general price level has decreased. Okay, Good. So those are the three theories that we have that explain our upward sloping short run aggregate supply curve. Again, why output might deviate from long run potential output when prices are different from what we expect. And in the next video, I'm going to have you watch another explanation of sticky wages, which I think is really insightful and useful for your understanding. So I hope you enjoy that. And then we're done building this model. We're finally ready to use it. So when we come back together, we'll be talking about long run changes in our economy.